In this video, we're going to look at the replacement rules of SD+. These are rules that allow you to replace a sentence or sentential component with an equivalent. So here's an example, the double negation rule, right? This says that if you have a sentence or a component of a sentence of form P, then you can replace it with the same thing with two negations in front of it. And then this is now, this double-headed arrow here, what this signifies is that you can also go in the other direction. So if you have sentence or sentential component that has two negations in front of it, you can strip those off. The replacement rules differ from inference rules in two ways. So, like, here's an example of an inference rule that we're familiar with, right? This is conditional elimination. First of all, inference rules only go in one direction, right? So if you have a conditional and you have its antecedent, then you can infer the consequent. But of course, if you have the consequent, right, you couldn't go and infer the antecedent, for example, right? You only get to use these things in one direction. The other thing with inference rules is they only apply to entire sentences. So if you have the conditional and then you've got the antecedent as a subcomponent of another sentence. You have, say, P or R. Um, you can't do anything. You can't apply conditional elimination to that. You have to have these as separate sentences on their own lines before you can use this at all. Replacement rules go in either direction. So if you have A, then by the double negation rule, you can get not A. And then if you have not A, by the double negation rule, you can get A. So you can go either way with this. You can also apply the replacement rules to sentential components. So if you have not A implies B, then you can strip the negations off of the A and you can get if A then B. And this is still replacing equivalent sentences with equivalents, right? If you run the truth tables on these two sentences, what you'll see is that these two are actually equivalent. Right. So applying the replacement rules to sentential components is just another way of allowing you to replace um, equivalent sentences with equivalents. So these are the rules of replacement. This is the full list of them. There's kind of a lot, but the thing is that the more of them that you know and that you can use, the more often you can take a sentence and you can transform it into something that you can use more easily in a derivation. Um, However, I mean, none of these are strictly necessary, right? Anything that you can derive using these, you'll be able to derive using only SD. They just make your derivations more efficient. Um, some of them, though, I mean, they're extremely valuable because of the amount of efficiency that they will add. I mean, you take something like like rules like commutation, association, double negation, doing things like this in SD, right? Commutation allows you to just change the order of the sentences in a disjunction or conjunction. Association, you're just moving parentheses around in a string of uh, conjunctions or disjunctions. Double negation, we've already seen, right? These are very, very simple moves, basically just bookkeeping moves, but they take a number of lines in SD, right? This adds a lot of length to a derivation. It's really, really handy to be able to just do this in one line and get it over with. Um, Implication is another one that's really, really valuable because it allows you to convert conditionals to disjunctions and back. Really, really useful way of changing the form of sentences to better match what you can work with. De Morgan is another thing that's extremely valuable because remember that in SD, right, if you have a negated conjunction or a negated disjunction, you can't apply any inference rules to this. So these sentences of these forms are really problematic. De Morgan allows you to convert these into disjunction of negations or conjunction of negations, and you can apply inference rules to these. So you take these, you convert them into something useful. So a lot of these rules end up they make your derivations vastly more efficient. Um, still, because of the fact that there's so many of these, one of the things that you get with SD plus is this. So in SD, derivations they're kind of all the same, right? Or like very, very similar. I mean, there's just not a lot of room for variation in them. In SD plus, this is where people start like having their own styles of derivations, and it arises from which of the rules of replacement they use most often, right? People will rely very heavily on particular rules, and the result of that is that their derivations will end up being different from other people who don't use those rules, right? They'll use different ones. Um, so that's what's characteristic, or one of the things that's characteristic in SD plus is people will tend to rely most heavily on a subset of the replacement rules. Um, but they're all valuable given what situation that you're in. While at the same time, none of them are ever strictly necessary. There's always going to be another way to do this. It's just that those other ways of doing it, sometimes they're extremely complicated and inefficient.